You are listening to the Horse Radio Network, part of the Equine Network family.
Hello and welcome to this episode of the Disease Du Jour podcast. I'm your host, Carly Sen, and in this episode, I spoke with Dr. Jennifer Madera about the role of an FEI endurance veterinarian. This episode of Disease Du Jour is brought to you by Equithrive. Dr. Madera is a 2004 Missouri graduate. She moved to Ocala for an equine internship at Peterson & Smith and stayed on with them as an ambulatory associate. Dr. Madera later was given the opportunity to work a few relief shifts at a sister clinic where she began seeing dogs and cats. That is where she found her love of being a small animal vet and never turned back. In her spare time, she still works at several endurance rides a year to maintain a connection with her equine background. Thank you, Dr. Madera, for joining us today.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm happy to be here.
Can you share a little bit about your background and what led you to become an FEI endurance veterinarian?
Sure. I graduated from the University of Missouri all the way back in 2004 and ended up in Ocala, Florida, doing my internship as an equine ambulatory veterinarian. Somehow ended up probably 15, 16 years ago as an equine veterinarian getting asked to provide treatment support at an endurance event without much knowledge of the sport. Ended up working an endurance ride, providing some treatment, and learned about the sport. There's quite a few FEI and AERC or national endurance events in the Southeast and in the Central Florida area. A couple years after working that initial ride, I had an equine client who was a ride manager for several AERC rides, and she recruited me to come be a control judge or veterinarian at those events as well. And honestly, I just sort of fell in love with the discipline, the hard work, how much care and effort the riders put into these horses, and seeing how much these horses love to go out and compete and go down the trail and come back, and seeing them come back sometimes happier and sounder at 75 or 100 miles than they were at the start. So it's just been really fun to, see riders and horses compete and succeed, and to help them remain healthy and sound throughout the events.
So what does the FEI endurance veterinarian's role entail? And I know there are a few different roles, so maybe you can walk us through those different positions.
FEI veterinarians, there are numerous disciplines, and you can have official veterinarians for endurance, jumping, eventing, dressage, paradressage, vaulting, combined driving. I might be missing one or two, but there's numerous disciplines. Within endurance, there is a separation of the endurance official veterinarian and the endurance treatment veterinarian. I am currently a level 3 endurance official veterinarian out of 4 levels, and a level 2 endurance treatment veterinarian. And at an FEI endurance event, there are usually a minimum of 4 FEI endurance veterinarians on site. You have at least 3 working the line or the vet gate, at least 1 as a designated treatment veterinarian, even at a small event. So the official veterinarian's role is to perform initial inspections. That includes making sure passports are correct, vaccination history is correct, the horses appear healthy upon arrival. There is then an inspection, which is basically the vet in to approve the horses to compete. And that includes soundness exam, pulse, monitoring, hydration, everything from skin tenting, capillary refill time, GI sounds, muscle tone, any sensitivity or soreness, along with gait. So that they have to pass that inspection in order to be approved to compete. And then they have to then pass that inspection numerous times during the event as well as at completion of the ride.
This episode of Disease Du Jour is brought to you by Equithrive. Spring is in the air, and although it feels like the perfect time to turn up your horse's turnout, proceed with caution. As the seasons change, the sugar content in grass increases, a bad recipe for easy keepers. The folks at Equithrive have formulated products to help you navigate these potential pasture pitfalls. Equithrive's Madera is a pelleted supplement that is scientifically proven to support healthy metabolic function and a healthy inflammatory response in horses. It's bona fide joint and metabolic support, all in one easy-to-feed pellet. It's a smart choice for easy keepers on limited or restricted diets. Visit equithrive.com today and use the promo code DUJOUR to get 20% off your first order, plus free shipping. That's www.equithrive.com, promo code DUJOUR. So I know you just touched on this briefly, but can you walk us maybe with a little bit more detail through the process for vet checks and that gate process and how you make decisions regarding a horse's fitness to continue?
Sure. So when a horse arrives at the vet gate, initially a pulse is taken. In order to meet pulse criteria, it is generally set at 64 beats per minute. If a horse does not meet pulse criteria, they will not be allowed to continue, period. They still have to complete the vet gate, complete the inspection for a safety check, and usually get assessed by the treatment veterinarian, even if they've been disqualified. After meeting pulse criteria, they come to one of the official veterinarians who then will take a pulse. The horse will trot 125 feet straight away, straight back. The veterinarian will then take a second pulse 1 minute after the first pulse, and that will be the cardiac recovery index, or CRI. So that has been shown to be a good indicator of overall condition. So your cardiac recovery index should be equal or less. So say their first pulse was 64 beats per minute, the second pulse should be 64 or less. If that second pulse has spiked up, doesn't mean anything specifically, but it is cause for concern, and we're going to look at that horse more closely. Then hydration parameters are assessed, everything from skin tint, jugular refill, capillary refill time, mucous membrane color, gut sounds in all four quadrants, muscle tone, any surface factor, rubs, abrasions from tack, wounds on limbs, interference marks between limbs, all of that is assessed. Gait is assessed. Gait irregularity would be cause for potential elimination. And when a horse is presented and there is cause for concern, they are not eliminated by one veterinarian. There is a 3 veterinary panel that then will have an anonymous vote and then either pass or fail that horse for continuation or completion. All completions are voted on by a 3 veterinarian panel.
Yeah, so it's definitely a very involved process, but it's nice that you have a wider array of people assessing and nobody single-handedly making those decisions.
Absolutely.
So what are some common injuries or medical issues that you see in endurance horses, and what are some red flags that might stand out to you in a vet check?
I think the biggest thing in a vet check that you're looking for is overall soundness. I mean, they may take 1 or 2 stiff steps, understandably, after 25, 50, 75 miles, 100 miles. But we don't want to see a consistent gait irregularity, certainly consistent lameness. Sometimes these horses just come in and you see an exhausted expression. Obviously, we are looking at their overall condition, but you do want to pay close attention to the horse's demeanor, not just a sound gait. You want to see good impulsion. You want to see that they're, active and eager to trot off and don't need encouragement to go. Very poor gut sounds is a cause for concern. The increased cardiac recovery index is something that we're going to look at. Muscle soreness, back soreness. This horse might be sound, but you run your fingers along its back, and its back muscles are extremely sore. That's cause that this horse may not be needing to continue. So dehydration, you look at all these things and, if they are not fit to continue, we would certainly much rather get that horse stopped off the trail and to the treatment vet before serious injury, dehydration, tie-up has occurred. And that's the job of the official veterinarians, to identify minor changes that may be progressing to a major injury or illness.
Now, if a horse were to become seriously injured during the competition, would that also be your role to treat that horse, or would there be somebody else that would be responsible for that?
It would depend on my assigned role at the ride. Certainly, FEI's overall, goal is the welfare of the horse. So whatever needs to be done to stabilize a horse is going to take priority over anything. But there is a designated treatment veterinarian. And if that's the case, that veterinarian is there usually with a stock veterinary truck and an area to provide, initial triage from fluids, bandaging, medications as needed. There are always horse ambulances available if needed to transport a horse to a referral hospital. Those locations are always predefined, and we have a contingency plan in place in order to arrange for referral and transportation if need be. But, we treat a lot of horses with fluids in the field, and a lot of treatments for endurance horses is fluids. So
right.
Rehydration, there are certainly electrolyte abnormalities that occur. A lot of them, if you rehydrate the horse, they correct their electrolyte abnormalities, the tie-ups, we can get them back on track.
Right. So I guess sort of on that same topic, I know endurance racing has been scrutinized publicly for welfare concerns in the past. So what role do you believe veterinarians play in upholding social license to operate? And how do you think that FEI regulations have evolved in response to discussions about welfare?
I think that, the veterinarian's role is to follow the rules consistently, remember that the end goal is welfare of the horse. The goal is not for a rider to complete or win or, succeed in getting a certain degree of mileage. The goal is for that horse to be healthy and safe at the end of the day, hopefully to go on and ride another day if today wasn't the day. I think that the veterinarian's role is to remember that, be an impartial judge, and use objective guidelines to make those decisions to help the horses succeed. And, I think that, there are, any equestrian athletic discipline has welfare concerns. The social license to operate, I think, is very important that we're, taking a closer look at that. That was a really interesting panel discussion at AAP that I attended, at least a portion of, down in Orlando. And I think that it's increasingly important that as veterinarians and, equine professionals, that we continue to look at that, because a lot of the general public doesn't understand what's going on. But these endurance horses are very well cared for. Their riders really care about these horses in general. Of course, there's always, just like anything, there's always exceptions to the rule. But in general, I have been really impressed with how the competitors care about their horses. Sometimes they get race brain, and we have to remind them that, remember, they've been riding for 12 plus hours at times, and they're exhausted too. So, they may be more dehydrated than their horse. So I think that the riders in general really care about their horses, want their horses to remain healthy and be a long-term teammate for them. And most of them make really good decisions to get these horses to move forward. I think that the rules have evolved with very strict guidelines as to qualifications to compete. You have to qualify in order to compete in the different the different events. You then have mandatory rest periods, be it a national or an FEI event, between rides. And if your horse is disqualified for specific things, be it a metabolic disqualification, a lameness disqualification, failure to qualify due to time or length of the ride, there are specific rest periods that need to be met before these horses can go back out. There are strict drug testing rules, and we haven't even touched on the prohibited substances list through FEI. These horses are not competing medicated, and if they are, there is regular drug testing, not at every event, but at most events, and it's not necessarily disclosed whether or not it will be performed. If a horse was seriously injured, there are, ways that we can go ahead and perform testing if we have a concern. So I think that that's very important, that, we really have very, very strict rules to follow. And in order to compete at a high international level, we need to, maintain these rules and, all work together to support these horses and athletes.
Yeah, it's always really impressed me how much veterinary scrutiny these horses have to undergo in order to complete an event, and, how closely they're analyzed even compared to some other FEI disciplines. What advice would you give veterinarians interested in working in FEI endurance events?
I think the first thing that you need to do is find an endurance event nearby and, contact the veterinarians listed and see if you can come apprentice or volunteer. At most rides, we have numerous scribes that are scribing for us as we're assessing the horses. And honestly, just hanging out for a few hours at the vet gate, you're going to see more lameness exams than you would in most days in clinical practice. I mean, like discussed earlier, a 100-mile horse is going to get assessed 5 to 6 times throughout the race. And again, at completion, a minimum of 3 to 4 examinations, even for a 1-star. So these horses are assessed numerous times before, during, and after the event. So I think just getting in touch with the officials. We're a pretty small group, and I really enjoy my FEI endurance colleagues. They are my mentors, they are colleagues, and they are now friends as well. When I sign up to go work a ride, I get to see, I'm like, oh, who am I going to get to see at this, at this event? Who am I working with? And a lot of times it's veterinarians from around the country and around the world. I mean, I've, made contacts in numerous countries, and, not just the veterinarians, the other officials, the ground jury, the stewards, technical delegates. It's just a great bunch of people. And we all, everyone really cares about the horses and the riders too. And, seeing the sport succeed and seeing these horses succeed.
Yeah, it seems like a really great opportunity, especially for people who, want to get better at improving their examination skills, and just, witnessing and performing all these lameness exams. It's really a valuable experience.
And, interesting, you'd love to think, oh, you're not diagnosing the lameness in the vet gate. You are making a quick assessment on one trot. Is this horse fit to continue or not? And if they are not fit to continue, you have not diagnosed. I mean, sometimes they can go and have additional, exam and diagnostics performed by the treatment veterinarian. But our goal is to move the ride along and move on from there.
Right. Do you have anything else you'd like to add before we wrap up today?
I really appreciate you having me on. I think that there are many more qualified endurance veterinarians that you could have spoken to, but I really appreciate the opportunity to share, my experiences. And, it is really, it's just a portion of my veterinary career, but it's a portion that I really enjoy doing. And it's definitely, I think, been an excellent experience, exposing me to, top level horses, incredible riders, and then some brilliant veterinarians that, I've learned so much by being involved in this. And, just to be flexible. I mean, we're in some pretty remote areas for some of these rides and, have limited facilities. And it's just, like most veterinarians, we MacGyver a whole lot of things. So I think it's, really, it's an interesting discipline, and it's been a great experience. And I think that you can learn a lot and make some great contacts and learn new things.
Yeah, well, we really appreciate having you on and sharing your perspective. Really interesting career path that I hope some veterinarians will consider learning more about after this episode. Thank you again, Dr. Madera, for joining us, and thank you to our audience for listening to Disease Du Jour. If you have any questions or suggestions for the podcast, please send me an email at csisson@equinenetwork.com.